South Africa's corruption crisis has led to an assortment of commissions of inquiry and investigative reports. The most recent of these is a special investigating unit's report on corruption relating to the procurement of personal protective equipment. Corruption has cost South Africa an estimated 15 billion rand. This is also there's also the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. That report will be handed to the President on January 1st. The President also recently signed 3 proclamations to start investigations into the allegations of maladministration and corruption at the Road Accident Fund, Overstrand Municipality and at state entity Alex Core. But do all these investigations and findings and reports translate into accountability? To answer that question, we're joined by Accountability Now Director Advocate Paul Hoffman. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. From dodgy dealings to missing millions to ongoing investigations in South Africa's COVID-19 PPE scandal, this has really revealed the shady procurement processes. Where will it all account to some sense of accountability?
Good morning, Impo, and good morning to your listeners who are up this early on a Sunday morning. I think that the starting point has to be the foundational values in our Constitution. It calls for openness, accountability, and responsiveness. And we are not getting that from the public administration, nor from our political leadership in South Africa at the moment. The structural problem that we have around all of the reporting that you referred to in the introduction, the commissions of inquiry, the reports from the Special Investigating Unit, is that this does not lead to the proper exacting of accountability. The Special Investigating Unit does not have any role to play in the criminal justice administration of South Africa. It's a special unit that has been created to seek to recover public funds that are misappropriated, whether by maladministration, negligence, or, as is so often the case these days, as a consequence of the criminality, the corruption that is part of COVIDpreneurism, which is there to supplement the tenderpreneurism that we had during the previous presidency. And until that structural defect is addressed, there's going to be a great deal of duplication of work in the organs of state that have to exact accountability from those who behave corruptly.
Now, millions in public funds were channeled to politically connected companies, some of which have also been found to only have registered around the time when COVID-19 hit South Africa. And that really speaks to so many loopholes when it comes to who in the end will be held accountable in terms of ensuring that some of those funds are indeed returned, and the nature of the crimes that take place under corruption are ones that continue to be ongoing, because even as, for instance, the SIU has now handed President Cyril Ramaphosa the COVID-19 graft report, there is still ongoing corruption when it comes to PPE.
Yes, the difficulty is that corruption flourishes in a culture of impunity. If you can behave corruptly with no consequences, and your colleagues around you see that you are behaving corruptly and profiting from your corruption as a result of the culture of impunity that is abroad in South Africa at the moment, then more and more people jump on the bandwagon, and the state is in effect stolen blind. The process continues until the corruption overwhelms the state. And that is the trajectory that we are on at the moment, and it will remain the trajectory until such time as the cabinet takes a resolution that was made last year by the National Executive Committee of the ANC seriously. The leadership there I think it's the top 85 or 90 members of the ANC, passed a resolution calling on government urgently to establish a new, permanent, standalone, independent, specialized body to deal with corruption. And when that happens, there will be better compliance with the binding decisions of the Constitutional Court in the Glenister litigation. There will be better compliance with the STIRS criteria that were laid down for the guidance of the executive and the legislature in that litigation, and we will get consequences for those who behave corruptly. And the consequences are many and varied. The SIU can only rake back money. It cannot fine anybody. It cannot mount a criminal prosecution. The job of the criminal prosecution in relation to this sort of matter is that of the investigating directorate of the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks doing investigative work to supplement the paucity of talent, skill, and capacity in the investigating directorate, whose head has recently resigned. That form of the restructuring of the criminal justice administration and the elimination of the duplication of work that is required if you first have a commission of inquiry and then hand the report of the commission of inquiry over, go through all of the pain of people reviewing the findings of the commission of inquiry, and then only start looking at the question of the criminal consequences, the seizure, the forfeiture of monies misappropriated, and the trying and punishing of those found guilty of corrupt activities, such as the abuse of the procurement system. The abuses there occur when urgent procurement is required in an emergency situation, such as the sudden advent of the pandemic. And if you don't get the consequences flowing, if you find that reports gather dust, that the SIU investigation has to be duplicated by an investigation in the Criminal Justice Administration, then you have the culture of impunity bedding itself down and making it worse for South Africa until such time as there's nothing left to steal, at which point the corrupt move on to some other organism of which they can feed. And we really do need to get serious about both that resolution of the NEC, which is very congruent with what the courts have said, and get over the hollowing out of institutions that occurred during the Zuma presidency and which has effectively continued now. You know, there were over 500 scorpions looking into serious corruption before 2009. The ID has a permanent staff of 17 and a total, including people seconded to it, of 120. We can't be surprised that the corruption is not being counted as it should be in a well-run state if so few people are engaged in that job. And clearly, the scorpions vastly outnumbered the people now working on the work that they used to do.
It's interesting, Advocate Hoffman, if you'll allow me to interrupt you, that you mention the staff shortages at the NPA. I mean, we heard Shamila Batohi speaking in response to some parliamentary questions this week, saying that, being probed about the reasons why ID head Herman Connier had resigned and not really willing to give up much information. But the Sunday Times speaks about a lack of resources, the shortage of resources being one of the factors that may have also led to her resignation. When it comes to the order of events that you've been describing. The SIU then has this information on matters that they now refer to the NPA, and then a lot of expectation rests on the shoulders of the NPA to get cracking and get the work going. But there are challenges when it comes to that. You also, as accountability, now raised the concern of the slow pace at which the NPA is performing in terms of targeting those high-profile cases, which will really make a massive difference in the fight against corruption.
Yes, there's no doubt that what you're putting to me is a fair summary of what is going on. And you can't only blame the NPA for its lack of resources, because it's a question of generating the political will to address the problem. One of the aspects of the problem is that the NPA during the Zuma administration was repurposed and hollowed out. It was repurposed to assist with the business of state capture, which you do by making dockets disappear, or by dragging your feet on dockets that you can't make disappear, or by losing witnesses or statements from witnesses. And all manner of tricks are used in order to see to it that those who have behaved corruptly are not held to account. And while it is the work of the NPA, which has about 4,500 staff altogether, the work of those who counter corruption is regarded as a specialized job which ought to be carried out by well-trained, independent, structurally and operationally independent personnel who are properly trained and who are resourced in a manner which is guaranteed. We have none of that at the moment, and worst of all, the secure tenure of office, which is one of the requirements that the courts have laid down, is not present in the ID. The investigating directorate is there for a period of 5 years. Advocate Cronje's appointment was for only 5 years, and she quit about halfway through. And the personnel that are working there are working on secondment rather than as permanent members of the anti-corruption machinery of state, which is a requirement of the law that is simply being flouted by the way that the criminal justice administration has been structured. For 10 years, accountability now has been saying that the best way to fix the mess is to create a separate institution under Chapter 9 of the Constitution. Why Chapter 9? Because Chapter 9 guarantees the secure tenure of office of the Chapter 9 institutions. And if that institution is put in place, we could have super scorpions with secure tenure of office, which the old scorpions didn't have, and we could get on with the work of countering corruption. And if it's a new institution that starts from scratch, a lot of people who are currently in the private sector and have the skills and the experience to get on top of corruption will
Advocate
return
Hoffman, if
to
you'll
the
allow me
public
to
service.
just interrupt you for the sake of time.
Yes, of course.
Looking at some of the challenges that you've put forward, does this now essentially perhaps translate into the work of the SIU being in vain, because the chances and the pace of prosecution doesn't seem to balance it all out, especially looking at the president now having the SIU report in COVID-19 PPE on his table, and also expecting to get the state capture report of inquiry in January, on the 1st of Jan, as well as the other, corruption at the Road Accident Fund, and as well as Alex Corr. What are some of the expectations, and how much muscle does that give President Cyril Ramaphosa in terms of his efforts to curb the pace of corruption?
Yes, I'm afraid that I'm disappointed that the cabinet has not reacted more swiftly to that resolution by the National Executive Committee of the ANC, which is the highest decision-making body in the ANC. At Accountability Now, we got tired of waiting, and we prepared draft legislation that would see the urgent establishment of the anti-corruption entity within Chapter 9 of the Constitution, which we believe is what is needed. In the meantime, the work of the SIU on the civil recovery of money has to be duplicated in the Criminal Justice Administration. I would hope that many of the members of the SIU, who themselves feel frustrated because they see, even though they are able to recover money from those who have not hidden it too cleverly, that their work does not lead to corruptions. I would think to convictions for corruption. I would think that many of the members of the SIU would be eager to join the new body, the new anti-corruption body, because they would have the teeth of being able to not only recover the money, but also to mount successful prosecutions against those who are corrupt. But until the political will to do so is generated, and that is really the job of the media and of civil society, faith-based organizations, business. You were talking about Cascabadia a few minutes ago. All of the good things that could happen in South Africa won't happen while corruption continues. Fresh investment that creates new jobs, that addresses poverty and reduces inequality, cannot possibly be a situation we can look forward to while corruption continues, because people don't want to invest in a corrupt society because they're afraid they will lose the investment that they make.
Very well. Thank you so much for that breakdown. Of course, Advocate Paul Hoffman there, speaking as Accountability Now Director, giving us a sense of the overall picture when it comes to accountability as the corruption and those reports are now landing on President Cyril Ramaphosa's table. Very